today I'm speaking with Katty Douraghy. She's an entrepreneur, an author, a facilitator, and she's written a book called The Butterfly Years, A Journey Through Grief Towards Hope. So today that's exactly what we'll be talking to. How to deal with grief, if you know someone who's going through grief, how to handle that, and how to get to a place of hope when you are coming through trying times. So enjoy. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast for this week. This week, we are going to be talking about grief, how to navigate through that, and how to have hope on the other side. And so I have with me Katty Douraghy. Hi, Katty. How are you, darling?
Hello, Natalie. Nice to be here with you.
Yeah, wonderful to have you here. Now, Katty is the author of a book called The Butterfly Years, A Journey Through Grief Towards Hope. From my understanding, this is really a memoir.
Correct.
And it's an account of your personal experience. So maybe we could start there and see, and just, walk through what your experience was.
Absolutely. I'll be happy to share the story of my loved ones with you. So in 2011, I lost my stepmom and my father. So my stepmother in January, my stepfather is also gone, but not that during that time period. So I lost my stepmother in January, my father in February, and my mother in April of 2011. So during a 4-month period, very, very big losses in my life. And then that was compounded 2 years later by the loss of my cousin, who was younger than me, which I think I even took it even harder just because she was so young and so vibrant. And then my uncle passed away, and then my stepfather followed, and he passed away. So in a period of 4 years, there were 6 very devastating losses to me. And at the time, it felt so dark. I felt that I just wanted to hide. I didn't want to necessarily deal with it. I wanted to just sweep it under the rug at the same time. And I'm a business owner. I can't do that. I'm sure we have parents on this call. We have responsibilities in life. So as much as I wanted to hide in a cocoon, I just couldn't. And just little by little, I started to crawl my way out of that. But what was happening, Natalie, at the same time that a beautiful hummingbird is right out my window, and I see the hummingbirds on your wall there. So at the same time that I was feeling so devastated and so much loss, I felt this energy within me. I cannot explain it, but I could see life around me everywhere. And so this was the duality that was happening simultaneously. So as much as death was around me, I could see life around me. My mom passed away in April, so it was spring, and it was beautiful, and flowers were everywhere. And I just remember going through this existential crisis, thinking, how could there be so much beauty when I just felt so much ugliness around me? How could there be so much life when there was so much death around me? And that really ended up being the spark for the book. Although my intention was never to write a memoir, my intention always was to create a journal, a self-help guide for others that were going through this process. But clearly, someone up there or some people up there needed to have their story told first. So the memoir came first. And then once that was published, as I put my attention to the journal and created the journal after the fact.
Right. Yeah. So in my experience, grief isn't textbook. It isn't everyone feels this. And then, and I know people talk about the certain stages of grief and so forth. And I don't even know if I believe in that either, because in my experience, what I've seen is that grief is a very personal thing. Mm-hmm. So how was it showing up for you?
Actually, great question, because I felt exactly the same way. I had never really experienced grief until all of these happened at once. And I had come across the 5 stages of grief and had learned that for some reason in my mind, prior to the grief happening, I expected this journey through grief to be a linear thing. First you felt this, then you felt that. And it certainly isn't that. It's very much a circular, you feel, you're feeling fine, and then suddenly something comes and just, sweeps you off your feet, and you're like, oh, where did this emotion come from? So it was very tumultuous. Certainly there were more than 5 stages. There must have been like 20 stages fall within that. But I agree with you. Grief is very personal, and every person is going to go through that journey on their own. Although I think society has expectations for us and time limits for us.
Right. No, exactly. And judgments.
Oh,
I mean, let's be honest, so. We're like, okay, it's been a year. You should be over this by now.
Yes, exactly.
And I don't think that, society's judgments help when you're on that journey yourself.
Exactly. And also self-judgment. I know I had self-judgment for myself through this, whether I was grieving too long, whether I was grieving enough, whether I was crying enough. And if I laughed, I would question myself, should I be laughing? And really what I came to is just, there's this duality showed up everywhere. And there's just this duality of emotions that happen all the time. There's a gentleman by the name of George Bonanno who had written a book called The Other Side of Sadness, I believe it's the name of the title. And he talks about oscillation. And that's really what I felt, that like my emotions were oscillating from happiness to sadness and everything in between simultaneously. So I'd like to just share that the self-judgment is quite prevalent as well. At least it was for me, in addition to society's judgments, because there's a lot of that.
Yeah, because you're like, okay, you should be acting a certain way, you should be feeling a certain way, which I really don't believe is the case. And I think that with the 5 stages of grief, what happens if you get to great step 4 and then you go back to great step 2? It's like, well, did I digress, or am I, so again, that kind of adds to that, that self-judgment that we have.
Exactly.
And it's also important that you feel the emotions, right? We don't want to be suppressing any of those things.
No. And I think for me, looking back, I realized that, grief is this continuum, and, we feel different things at different times. And my goal was to get the book out on the 10th anniversary of my parents' passing. So last year was their 10th anniversary. So, I had started writing it about 3 years ago, but still to this day, something comes up. I smell something, I see something that will take me back to the beginning of that continuum, because it sparks that emotion and it comes back up. And I think it's okay for us to just forgive ourselves. We need to feel it, and it's important to feel it, and it's important to remember.
Right. And so what did it feel like for you? Like, you were going through this roller coaster of emotions, and then it was compounding, obviously, and especially when it came to the passing of your cousin. What were you doing to help to get you into a place where you could at least face the day? Because I can imagine there's a lot of people that have, and we're at that age where our parents are getting old. Our parents are transitioning. I have like at least 6 friends who lost their parents in the last 2 years, not specifically COVID related, like just because we're kind of at that age, right? So what kind of tools, what things were you doing to kind of help you through, those darker moments?
The main thing that I did long before the passings is I had gotten into this practice of journaling and just writing. Not a practice that I was doing every day, but every once in a while I would, pick up something and just write my thoughts and my emotions. And then when the grief happened, being able to have some sort of vehicle to continue my conversations was very, very important to me. The circumstances of the losses was in a way that I really didn't get a chance to finish what I wanted to say to these beautiful souls. And so writing was a very cathartic and very healing, without the intention of wanting to publish anything, just journaling that. Secondly, I started a practice of meditation. I'm not a natural meditator. My mind wanders everywhere. And I found that the practice of a guided meditation was really helpful to me. And just soothing to just be able to sit there and listen to somebody else's words for 20 minutes was beautiful. But nature was very, very healing. So taking walks, being outside. I think we see life in nature. I saw it everywhere. And during that April of 2011, flowers blooming, birds singing. And although it was difficult to reconcile what was happening, to just see the sun coming out every day, just to see nature blooming in front of my eyes, it gave me a ray of hope. It gave me something to hold on to, knowing that this is just a cycle of life and we go through it.
Yeah. So the book is, is a journey through grief towards hope. So how did you get there? Like, how do you have hope after all of that loss?
Yeah, I crawled my way.
Yeah.
I did. A few things. And this, I'm not sure when this came to me. I think it came to me early on when I was seeing life around me and seeing beauty around me. I took it upon myself as a responsibility to live because my loved ones couldn't. And I believe, I feel them around me. I believe that they're experiencing things because I'm saying yes to things. So very early on, I said yes to whatever opportunities came at me, whatever travel came at me, whatever meeting with anyone came at me, because I just, life is short and I wanted to just say yes to everything. And that really just gave me this energy. I did have this uncanny energy that I don't know where it was coming from. So the only thing that I can imagine is that I was picking up on other people's energies and putting myself out there at every turn. But another thing that was incredibly surprising to me and came with a lot of judgment, self-judgment, was I started dancing. Zumba specifically. So I started exercising, and the music, the endorphin, something just really changed my mood. Although anytime I was happy in dancing, I would be questioning myself. Like, should I be? This has only been 6 months. Should I be on that? Like, is this a proper way of grieving? And for me, it was. So just physical movement, being out there, meditating, all of those things, those are all little things, but together for me, they gave me the strength that I needed to crawl my way out. Yeah. Took years. It wasn't an overnight. I was not an overnight success by any means.
But I think that's anything. And I think grief is not just the loss of a loved one, but it could be the loss of a marriage. It could be, the loss of your children being close to you and moving far away, or whatever that is. I know that when my 20-year marriage ended, that first week, that's what I did. I was listening to an audiobook in my headphones. Not that I heard it for the first few days, because I was just so, oh my God, my life, what am I going to do? Who am I? All of the questions. But I would be walking, and I would be out walking along the water down in San Diego, and just having to do something where I was moving, that I had, some kind of endorphins, something moving, so that I could, because I know that if I'm focusing only on the loss or the pain, then that's all I see. And of course, I wasn't expecting to be happy and grateful that week, of course.
Yeah.
But I needed to shift just a little bit so that I could talk to people, that I could talk about this change in my massive change that just happened in my life, but in a way that I wasn't lost in it, that I could actually, converse with other people and just face the day, really.
You bring up such a good point. I mean, talking and being able to share the journey with others is so important. And grief and death certainly are things that, from a society's perspective, we don't talk about, we don't want to talk about, we sweep it under the rug. But it's unfortunately something that we will all go through at some point. Our own mortality even is a topic that people just don't want to have to deal with. And it's reality as birth happens on a regular basis, death happens on a regular basis. And I'd like to talk about it. When I talk about it, I feel that I'm memorializing and honoring those who have passed. I don't want to forget them, and I don't want to put their pictures in a cupboard and not deal with it. They're everywhere. So if we could have a platform, if we could have a space, which is what you're doing here, to be able to talk about the things that, as you said, society doesn't want to talk about, or that we generally don't talk about. These are the realities of our lives.
Yeah. And again, I know this is a personal thing, but for you, did you have someone you could talk to? Did you have people that you could kind of, vent or just, get the words out? Or was it mainly journaling that was your avenue for that?
Correct. So obviously I have a amazing support system and my partner, my spouse, and my other family members, but they were also going through their own journey with these losses, right? Where I think what really was very cathartic for me and really a very, very healing opportunity is that I belong to an organization called the Entrepreneurs Organization, EO, and through some volunteer work that I was doing with them, I had an opportunity to travel, and everything that we do within EO, it's always coming from a personal experience share. It's a non-advisory group, so we always talk about experiences in business, personal, the whole integrated life work piece. And so I had the opportunity to share my story quite a bit. And vulnerability is one of the pillars of how we connect with each other. So putting myself out there and being vulnerable is something that I kind of had to do for my volunteer work, but I got so much out of it. And anytime I would share, people would come up to me and they would thank me for talking about something that they were feeling inside, but that nobody was talking about it out loud. So really having that opportunity, I think, through journaling, to just get my emotions moving, get my thoughts moving, but also to be able to just share with an audience and speak about it. And then to have the camaraderie of somebody else coming and saying, I've been there, I've been in your shoes, you're not alone. Or I thought I was alone. Thank you for talking about this.
Yeah.
I needed to hear it. So I think community, it really comes down to that. It comes down to community.
Yeah. Because I'm wondering, to be sharing like this and to be so vulnerable, you don't want to do that with just anybody, right? So if we have a friend, if we know someone in our life who is going through a grieving process right now, how can we best support them, do you think?
I think truly the best thing is just to be. We can't solve it. We can't fix it, and if we come from an approach of not trying to solve a problem, because this is not a problem to be solved, it just is. It just is. So just to be with someone in empathy, in just being with them, that's the key thing. I think where we sometimes err in our societies is we're so used to the happy Hollywood ending that or that maybe we're not comfortable to sitting in the discomfort, that we want to say things like, I don't know, at least you loved, or, I can't tell you some of the things that came to me from a place of support, but it wasn't supportive. And I think it would just have been easier just to say, you know what, I don't even know what to say. I'm just here if you need me. And just to sit with someone.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, I agree, because it doesn't matter, because you think about it, sometimes we're like, at least you got to love them and you've got all those memories and, maybe this was meant to be. I mean, it was just their time. And like you you kind of want to explain and but the thing is you have no idea how that's going to land, and maybe something like that lands okay one day for you, but then the next day it's like, how could you possibly say that?
It's true. It's true. There's a great book by an author called Megan Devine, and she has a book called It's Okay That You're Not Okay. And in the back of it, actually, she has a whole chapter devoted to the things to say to people who are in pain.
Right.
And who've lost someone. So I think it's a very valid thing to just know, I think we come from a place of goodness. We come from a place of wanting to help, but just to realize that sometimes there isn't a solution. There's not a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. We just need to let the person go through all of those emotions we talked about on their own terms.
Yeah, and understand that if the person who's grieving shows up one way one day and completely different the next day, then don't take that personally. That's got nothing to do with you. That's just where they're at, and in that day or in that moment. And I think that's really important to understand as well.
Yes.
Because sometimes we're like, we want to be there, and of course, we all want to take the pain away. Mm-hmm. We could do that. That would be wonderful. But this is not one of those situations, and
exactly
just holding that space and just being loving and just being an ear or a shoulder or whatever that is in that moment.
Yeah, exactly.
The best way to do that.
It's interesting what you bring up. I was speaking to a much younger person some time ago, someone in their 20s, whose friend had a loss. And I was asking, I said, well, how's your friend doing? And they said, he seems fine. We went out the other night for dinner and he seems fine. He's fine. And I said, just because they seem fine and they're fine at that moment, it doesn't mean they're not grieving. This truly is cyclical. It's going to come and go. It's going to come and go in waves. And it's awesome that you went out with them and you had a great time. They need to have a great time, but not to make an assumption that somebody's not grieving just because they're out and having a good time with friends. It's important.
So let's talk about hope, how you shifted to hope.
Mm-hmm.
So what does hope look like for you after going through this experience?
Hope to me is recognizing that we will stumble on this path. It's not to say now I'm hopeful, but what hope is just going to that inner strength that comes from where we don't even realize we have it. It comes from within. I call it a transformation. It's just we have to go deep inside to be able to pull that out and to recognize that tomorrow will be a better day.
Right.
It'll be a hard journey to get there, but tomorrow will be a better day. And there will be moments in that journey to tomorrow that I may not feel that it's a better day, that it may just feel very dark and very ugly, but to just hold on to that. And I think that's the lesson that nature taught me. When the sun came out the day after my mom died, I was shocked. My world just felt like it had ended, but clearly it hadn't, because the sun came out and babies were born. And flowers bloomed and birds chirped. So that's what gave me hope.
Right. Mm-hmm. And are you at a place where you're just focusing on the next day, or you have an optimistic view of your future?
At this point today?
Yeah.
No, I'm very optimistic at this point. I think the way I look at grief and the way I talk about grief is, for some, grief is an open wound and it's bleeding right there. And for some, it's there's a scar, it's gapped over. For me, it is a scar. I don't feel it all the time, but every once in a while when I run my hand on that scar, it comes back. So it's settled deep into my heart. But it's not something that is visible in front of me all the time until I touch that scar.
Right.
And I remember. Or until something happens. I get triggered all the time. I was listening to one of your podcasts, and it was about aromatherapy and scents. And I find scents are an incredibly triggering thing for me, positive trigger, actually positive and negative trigger. So my mom died of lung cancer. So cigarette smoke is a trigger for me. Every time I smell it, it just takes me to a negative place. But then the smell of jasmine, I grew up in Iran and we had jasmines everywhere. So the smell of jasmine takes me to my childhood and takes me to a positive place. So it's those little things that trigger me and take me back down to that emotional continuum that we were talking about. And sometimes my grief becomes really present. And then at other times it's settled. So that's where I am in my journey. It has settled. It just like anything else, it rises every so often, and that's okay.
Yeah, it's amazing. Cigars and pipe smoke, that reminds me of my grandfather, and I love the smell. I love the smell. But every time I smell it, I think of him. And I was young when I was like, I don't know, 10 or something when he transitioned. So, but yeah, it's a wonderful way to remember him too. So, Katty, I've really enjoyed our conversation today, and I know it's going to help a lot of people who are, either navigating through grief themselves, or if they're, have a friend in their life who is going through that. So, where can people reach out to you? Where can they find you, and where can we get their hands on their book?
Absolutely, thank you. So, where they can find me is I'm on LinkedIn, LinkedIn/Katty. Butterflyyears.com is the name of the website, as well as the name of the book and the journal, and my contact information is there, so they can reach me that way. And I do have a special promotion for your audience. If they're interested, I can share that with you afterwards if you want to share that with them. It's called It's Different 15.
Okay. Awesome. All right, Katty. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's been such a pleasure, and I'm wishing and hoping and seeing the best for you.
Thank you, Natalie. And thank you for creating the space for us women of a certain age to be able to talk about the amazing part of life that is still ahead of us.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.